Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I'm so excited to be part of the Kendra's Card Challenge Hop featuring Trinity stamps. If you're new to my channel, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more inspiration throughout the month. Today we're going to make cards using the first 3 sketches from Kendra's Card Challenge number 13. And I'm using paper from this Doodlebug pad I've had in my stash for a long time. So I have 4 of those. And then I have this Polkadot background stamp from Trinity Stamps and the Abstract Scratch background stamp from Trinity. Neither of those is a full 6 inches. They're like 5.5 or 5 3/4. So I did stamp an extra scrap of cardstock just to make sure I had enough to cut out all of the pieces. I'm going to begin sketch number 1 by adhering this 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of stamped paper to my card base, and then I'm going to go rogue. If you've been around my channel, you know I'm absolute garbage at following directions, even my own. So I'm using the pieces and the same basic idea. I cut my square and I'm adhering that to my card base, but I think the sketch has it centered. So I put mine kind of up, and we're going to do this in portrait as opposed to landscape. I think it's in landscape in the sketch. Then I have a whole bunch of 1/4 inch strips and I'm stacking them up for dimension. So there's 2 pieces of 120-pound white cardstock and then a piece of white shimmer cardstock on top of that. So I finished those up and now I'm going to arrange them. This has been a super popular style of card lately. I've just seen it all over Pinterest and I was so excited there was one in this sketch challenge. I practiced with my placement first, and so the short edge of each strip ends at one of the corners of my square. And I like that I've already glued my square to my card because it means that little piece of cardstock acts kind of like a bumper to make sure I get everything lined up okay. I messed up with the first one. I didn't double check to make sure that this second piece was going to go all the way off the edge of the card. Not a big deal. The glue was still wet. You know I love wet glue for these things. And then I'm just going to go around and I'm going to adhere each of those pieces to my card. I will say, if you decide to create the dimension like I did here, it creates a few challenges when you go to add any sort of images or other die cuts in that space, because it's easy for them to get kind of off kilter. I struggled with that a little bit. In the end, I love the card, but it's not quite centered the way I might have been able to do it if I weren't playing with all that dimension. That's okay. Then we have these donuts. This is the tiny donut dipper dies from Trinity Stamps, and they're so cute. They just came out and I have them in no fewer than 4 videos. I think one of them is still coming out next week, but I mean, seriously. I'm adding frosting using little dots of wet glue, and then you can just leave it covering up the hole if you don't mind. I am going to take my little fussy cutting scissors off camera and just trim around the inside hole. It's 4 little clips. It's not hard. It doesn't have to be perfect. You could do that before you glued it down if you want to have a little more wiggle room with your glue, but I wasn't worried about it. I overlapped my donuts with some glue ever so slightly, and then I added some foam. On the blue donut, I have 1 layer of 1mm foam squares, and on the purple one, I doubled it up where there isn't a donut behind it, just so that nothing was cattywampus. And then this is the A-GLAZE-ing stamp set that coordinates with all of their new donut products. I picked the one that says Eat More Whole Food because I think it's so funny. And I'm going to stamp that onto some scratch paper in my MISTI. And then I have a piece of acetate that is the same size as the sentiment strip I'm going to use. So I can lay that right on top, get it lined up perfectly. And then I'll put 2 scraps of cardstock in there, kind of butting up against that acetate to figure out where my sentiment strip needs to go to make sure everything's where I want it. Some people are really good at stamping and they can just like stamp onto this skinny little strip and it looks great every time. I am not that person. I'm just not. So for me, this little process with the acetate and the sticky mat, that was easier. Whatever works for you. And then I'm going to layer that onto a piece of light blue cardstock that is ever so slightly bigger. I didn't measure any of that. I just eyeballed it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape again to the middle and to the 2 sides because I have that dimension on those strips that surround the blue square. I kind of wish I had left the little triangles of foam off so I could put it slightly higher. But again, I still love this card. For our second card, we're going to move on to sketch number 2, and this is one of my very favorites. I love how bright and cheerful this card is. So I'm starting with a piece of pattern paper that I'm going to glue onto an A2 panel using my wet glue. And some days, you guys, I struggle to get it all lined up. So I edited out the part where I set it down and lifted it off 2 or 3 times, but it's going to work just fine. No one's going to know. On the sketch, that piece of white shimmer cardstock said that it should be textured cardstock. So I ran that through an embossing folder from Spellbinders just to add some fun texture and shine, and then I'll use my wet glue and add that onto the matte layer. While I work on putting the rest of this card together, I do want to tell you about the hop. There's a bunch of phenomenal designers here, and Trinity Stamps is sponsoring Kendra's card challenge and this hop. There are prizes to give away, and so all of the information for the giveaway is in the description box below the video. That is open until February 2nd. If you click on the hashtag in the title, that should show you all of the videos and the hops. Sometimes the hashtags don't work quite the way they're supposed to. So there's also a playlist that I will have linked for you. If you click the playlist, it will bring up all of the videos from all of the designers. Again, some of my very favorite card makers are in this hop. Definitely worth checking out. So make sure you hop along and check everybody out. All right, so I'm adding that all sort of onto the base of my card, and then I just wanted a sentiment here. I'm bringing in this older die set. It's the Slimline Envelope Builder, but it has this beautiful hello. It is the perfect size for this card, but if you don't want to buy the envelope builder, like if you don't think you'll use the envelopes, there's also a Simply Sentimental hello that has a bunch of different hello fonts, and I think they're wonderful. It has a hello that's a similar scripty font to this one. It's just a little bit bigger, and I liked how this one fit on here. So I stacked that up with 3 layers of cardstock, and then I'm going to add it onto the shadow layer that I've cut out of the same white shimmer cardstock that I embossed on my second layer for the card. I'm going to add a little bit of wet glue, and then that's going to get centered onto my diamond here. And then we're going to add a sassy little sub-sentiment. If you're new to my channel, I release on the 1st and 15th of every month a free printable with lots of sentiment strips. Well, this isn't in a kit yet. This is from when I was only making them for myself, but it says, hello, jalapeno, which I just think is hilarious. And that will finish up card number 2. For card number 3, we're going to make a shaker, and it's going to be real quick. I'm following sketch number 3, and I love how clever this is in its judicious use of patterned paper. Like, you're not wasting anything. So I'm layering up these 2 pieces onto their matte layers, and then they go on the sides of the card. I am going to use my grid mat just to help me center those and make sure that they're at the same height on both sides of my card. If it was easier for you, you certainly could use an entire strip of solid color cardstock and then an entire strip of patterned paper going across the center. But I love that I'm getting the most bang for my patterned paper buck. Is that, is that how it goes? On this card. Then there's supposed to be a rectangle and a flag, but again, I'm bad at following directions, so I cut out a circle. I have used the modern embossed circles from Trinity Stamps on this one. They have a bunch of modern embossed dies for slimlines and mini slimlines and A2s and 5x7s. And I'm going to hold this up here in just a minute. It leaves this little impression around the edge of the cardstock that is so stunning. And I think it really elevates a card. Then this is the Thanks a Watt die set. This entire release is full of puns, and I am here for it. So I layered some of these up. There's like 3 layers of light bulbs, and then there's an interior layer. So I cut a really, really thin black frame, and then I cut another layer frame. And then this is the piece that just cuts out like the top of the bulb and the base of the bulb. I was trying to make sure I got it lined up as close to the top as I could while still being able to keep that black frame inside my circle. So I ran that through my die cutting machine, and now I have a hole that went through both layers of my cardstock. I trimmed down a piece of acetate to be just slightly bigger than that hole, and I'll use some wet glue and add my acetate on top. I went a little heavy-handed, my friends. This is not uncommon. I'm a heavy-handed crafter, but I am just going to use my finger to squish the glue away from the hole in my cardstock to try to make sure you're not going to see any of that when my card is finished. I added the little base of the bulb with some silver cardstock right over top of the acetate. And then if it hadn't been past my bedtime, I would have put rip and stick sheet, like double-sided adhesive sheet from Trinity, behind the little squiggly piece, whatever that's called, the filament, inside the light bulb, but I didn't, and I didn't want to recut it. So I put a little bit of glue on the back of my hand and smeared it, and I just tapped that piece into the glue so I wouldn't have glue oozing out onto my acetate. Then I'm using wet glue, little dots of it, on my 2 frames that are going to go around that light bulb. I think it really just draws your eye towards it, makes it extra special. I have some thin foam strips and I am using 2 of them here, and I've removed the backing paper from both sides, and I'm going to go all the way around that circle. And then here's what it looks like once all the tape is on. I have sectioned off the bulb, just the top of the bulb, because that's going to be my shaker. I don't want my bits getting stuck where no one can see them. And I'm going to use 2 different shaker pieces for my insides. These are the white sparkle spots. They are probably my most used, definitely my most used. I think my very favorite shaker bits of all time. They're slightly translucent, so you can still see a little bit of this yellow circle that's going to be peeking through. And then there's the Oh My Stars that are super thin, sort of confetti stars. I cut a circle that's a little smaller than my blue circle, and I just laid that into the adhesive foam, and then I'll add glue all over the back of that, and I can add it straight to my card base. I didn't want to overfill my shaker. I definitely wanted to look like a yellow bulb that had been turned on, but then I'll get that all situated on my card. Now we're going to use the same trick we used on card number 1 to make our sentiment. This is the What's Up stamp set, and I wanted to make a shaker card that I could just have on hand to give to my kids when they needed like a little pick-me-up, or when I wanted to tell them how proud I was of them. So I'm going to stamp this onto just my scratch paper again, and it says, "You brighten my day," and then I'm going to lay my acetate strip over top of that. I'm going to just keep these acetate pieces in with that stamp set, so I have them to use over and over again. Then I'll remove the acetate once I've sort of created these 2 sides of my barrier, and I can line it up exactly where it needs to be. A little removable adhesive on the back of the strip so it doesn't move on me. I'll stamp it twice, and it is ready to go. I'm going to pick it up really carefully by the sides because the ink is still wet, but I'm impatient, so we're going to keep moving. And then I've cut a piece of that dark teal cardstock that matches the rest of the card, and I'm going to glue that right down on top of it. A little wet glue, and I will add this to the bottom of the card. I did actually trim out a banner to add to this, but because it's a circle instead of a square, I ended up not using it, and that will finish up card number 3. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I would love to know which of these 3 cards is your favorite. I'd love to know if you've done a Kendra's card challenge before. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss future inspiration. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.